Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I am Omid Fotouhi, the Director of Learning Innovation here at WGU Labs. So, thank you for being here for our Labs podcast series called Inside the Learning Experience. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. Lita Hooper-Simanga, who is an AI enthusiast and a learning designer at Labs. A little bit about Dr. Simanga. She is a digital learning professional adept at creating AI-powered learning solutions with over 25 years of post-secondary and professional development experience, including teaching, curriculum, program development, adult learner support, and digital learning experience design. Lita, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I wonder if you can, in addition to the intro I shared, introduce yourself a little bit and give us a history of who you are and how you got here.
Well, as you said, I have over 25 years of higher ed experience. I think I'm inching more over 30, but that gets a little scary to admit. So let's say 25. A lot of that has been as a faculty member. I taught English, which included American Lit, African American Lit is my area of expertise, and creative writing here in Georgia at one of the public colleges for over 25 years. And in that time, I also taught at a couple of what we used to refer to as proprietary schools. I like to call them the forward thinking online institutions who were doing online education when public colleges were really afraid to dip their toe in. And that afforded me a really interesting look into the possibilities of what we could do with online learning at a time when folks were really afraid. You know, back in the day when Phoenix was kind of like the scary place, no one really thought University of Phoenix degrees were valuable. And now we look at them as being kind of the leaders in that space. But what drew me to WGU was that the very same thing, that WGU was also a great presence in that space. I will say, this is kind of interesting. I will say that I tried to get employed by WGU for many, many times before I was lucky enough to land a position a few years ago. But yeah, my interest in online education really started many years ago. I started playing around with online course design because I would design my own courses. I didn't know that it was kind of odd to redesign every semester. But someone said, "You act like you're an instructional designer." And I was like, "What is that?" And so that brought me to, after deciding to move out of teaching, it brought me to instructional design. And for me, it was really about how can we prepare faculty to be more successful in the online space rather than kind of replicating what they were doing in the face-to-face space. But over the years, my interest has moved a little bit away from faculty and looking at the student and centering the student around the learning experience. And that's a big shift. But I think having that faculty background and that understanding of how faculty teach, and then this new, all of the technology that we have access to in terms of AI and online learning platforms, and then combining that with the student, of course, who is the most important of all of the players in the space. When you look at all of that, those are all the components that we see that we need in really effective online learning. And now with AI, we just have, the sky's the limit of what we can do.
Wonderful glimpse into the path that brought you here. It sounds like it's actually pretty well focused around this delivery model of online and technology enabled while also connecting to the student experience. And where better can you combine both than WGU, where we serve so many diverse individuals whose students' experiences really are at the heart of being able to deliver effectively. So it must be a wonderful playground for the learning that you're immersed in. I am curious about some of the projects you're working on. I know that we've had the chance to collaborate with some of the tools and program offerings like those in the Academy. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of those projects and the ones that seem to be most relevant to this philosophy that you've been immersed in?
Yeah, my time at WGU Labs has been, I mean, I can't even put it in words what I've learned, and also where we don't shy away from looking at the possibilities, right, in terms of education, specifically online education. And so I've had the pleasure of doing such a variety of work. Like when I first started, I actually worked on a major project for our enrollment department. So self-service enrollment, we were looking at how to solve the problem of students or prospective students who would enter the process of coming into WGU, but we would lose them somewhere along the way, right? So that by the time they arrived at what we would typically call registration or enrollment, some of those students fell through the cracks. Where were we losing them and why? And that was the question. So we looked at how we could kind of leverage technology and think about that journey that those prospective students take. And what we found along the way in that journey, where there were plenty of opportunities that we just weren't taking advantage of, that could give them the resources, motivation to then complete that journey to converting into students, enrolled students. So that was a really pretty interesting project, especially to start in my position at Labs. I saw immediately that Labs was a place that you really cared about exploring, looking at the why behind a problem, not just simply coming up with some possible solutions, but solutions that were really going to have take hold and make some changes. And I think that our solutions to that team ended up having a great impact on what now we see as self-service options in our enrollment process. We know because of the research and because of what we know about learning science and what we know about human behavior, that we have to offer various options because of people's interests, their assumptions, their biases, etc. And we just weren't leveraging those options before we did that project, and now we are. Another project that comes to mind is, let's see, we worked on what we would internally we just refer to as kind of competency-based faculty development. But really, it was a way to help other schools, departments, particularly a lot of the College of Nursing departments or School of Nursing throughout the country, who were converting their curriculum to a competency-based education curriculum. And who better to do that with, to partner with, than WGU, right? So we helped several departments come up with not only faculty development workshops to help their faculty make that mind shift, but also doing some curriculum mapping, helping them to actually convert their actual curriculum to a CBE curriculum, which meant taking those standard learning objectives and kind of converting them into competencies and seeing how that played out in their courses, the programs of study. That's been a very rewarding. And then recently we worked on with Academy, WGU Academy, we worked on Frontline management certification. So our academy, which is one of the many amazing departments or wings, if you will, of WGU, asked us to partner with them on this new program where they wanted to take a look at one of their micro certifications, which before we got involved, included 3 leadership courses. And so it was kind of an overall business leadership micro certification. This is for someone who may not have a degree, but they want some professional credentialing, right? And they wanted to take a closer look to see how they could improve the outcomes of that actual certification. And they partnered with us, and it has been a challenging but very rewarding project that we worked on with them.
I love how your journey again began at the pathways into education and then a design of the system within the education, and now finally the enhancements of the content that lives there. It's a beautiful life cycle. With this latest project with the Academy, can you share a little bit about what was the problem that you were trying to solve and why that matters to try to solve that problem?
Well, I think for Academy, their student population, their profile is students who typically apply to WGU and for whatever reason were not accepted right off, right, in that initial application process. Usually because they're lacking some background in or academic experience in particular courses that typically are in that general education bucket. Going through WGU Academy allows them to get those credits, that experience, to then be ready for the larger bachelor program at WGU. But many of those students also were looking for, again, as I said earlier, is professional credentialing. So how can we satisfy, this is what I think Academy is looking at, how can we satisfy those students, but also help to bridge that gap between the skills that they have so that they could be workforce ready to being workforce ready. Like, where can we help them make that possible without completing that bachelor degree? Because we know that takes time, and people are very, time is a major concern for a lot of working adults. They know what skills they lack, or at least they know they lack some skills to do the work or the jobs that they want to pursue, but they need to make that adjustment to overcome that gap as quickly as possible. And one way is through micro-credentialing. So Academy wanted to look at how can we create this microcert for these folks in a way that was not only going to get them the credentials that they need, but also within the actual curriculum, something that they could actually use and apply immediately. The curriculum that they had before we were involved was very strong. It was solid, but it was also very theoretical based. It was a leadership certification that was founded on, basic leadership principles. Again, very solid, but very theoretical. And so Academy asked us to take a look at it and make some changes, make sure that we develop new competencies, but also curriculum that could be applied immediately or even while they were completing the program, not just after they completed it. So we had some really fun ways of kind of what we call on the job challenges embedded in that curriculum. So yeah, that was one of the major goals, to create workforce ready or workplace ready curriculum that was also very scenario based. That was another component of that change.
Yeah, I love that. In my days as a researcher, there's a phrase, I'm probably not going to get it right, but it goes something along the lines of in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, it's just a theory. The reason why I like that is I think there's a similar dynamic between theory learning and applied learning. And when it comes to communication skills, management skills, you can know all the text content and theories, but when it comes to actually employing them, practicing, it's actually almost an entirely different science. So I love that you're trying to bridge the gap between the content and the applied. I am curious though, as you're thinking about doing this work, what bigger problem is this solving in the educational landscape, and who else is trying to, if you know of any other players or any other initiatives, also recognizing that this is a space that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think good question. Certainly we see that this is a concern of businesses in general, right? So looking at their potential workforce, they want to make sure that they are hiring folks who either have these skills or are at least primed to learning those skills once they enter these roles. So that was a big concern. In fact, that was part of our analysis stage of the project because we really wanted to capture what was needed so that we didn't waste time, effort on skills that were nice to have, but weren't as necessary. So part of the analysis phase of this was we worked with our product managers. They did a really great landscape analysis to tell us what were the major problems, pain points that employers were having. I will say this too, this microcert is focused on primarily three industries. So that's hospitality, fast food, and retail. So, although there are some common themes throughout all industries when it comes to preparing what we call frontline managers, those particular three industries have some very specific competencies. So, we did focus on those. I think the idea is that in the future, there may be another iteration of this microcert that would expand those industries. But we did want to make sure that we were capturing the right content. So, the landscape analysis helped us with that. And then we worked with our WGU Labs research team to then look at a variety of job descriptions. We used Lightcast, which is a kind of a job analysis platform, and it captured for us 500 job descriptions within those industries that fell into that bucket of frontline manager. And we used AI to kind of do that analysis where we pulled from those job descriptions, those common skills and competencies, and that then helped us create a competency framework. The competency framework then became our foundation for the courses that we ultimately designed and developed. So I'm not sure about other players in the space other than employers, but I'm sure that there are, either other colleges and universities who are very interested in this. We're looking at workforce development now in ways that we've never before. And the more information, the more data driven decisions that we make, the better we are of getting folks ready to be not only employed, but to actually enrich their career pathway, which is what we want, especially here at WGU. That's in our DNA, right? To provide access to higher education to those who are seeking it, regardless of what they're coming from, making sure they're prepared for the careers that they're going after.
I think you did a better job of answering that question than I could have imagined. You named the landscape issues. You've already been working with some of the key players, like really some intelligence agencies like CAST. We're deep into the workforce landscape. Employers, which is a partner that often educators fail to bring into the loop. They create curriculum in silos, and in particular, employers with a need for a skill set that are applied. So it really does feel like a very thoughtful design process for building out skill sets and curriculum that have the potential for real world impact. I wonder, in all of this research, and you've mentioned a lot of the learnings and insights, as part of your research, what recommendations or additional learnings do you think you might want to share with institutions or learning designers that might help them as they're doing their work?
Yeah, I think it's really important to, as usual, start with the student in mind, right? At Labs, we're really big on the journey, the learner journey, where we know the student starts, the experience that the student has in pursuing whatever it is, whether it's a degree or a certificate or even finishing a course. So start with the student and understand the student journey so that you can then understand the pain points so that we can solution around those pain points. One of the ways that we approached this was not only looking at the research, which was wonderful, gave us a sense of what businesses, organizations were looking for. As I said earlier, it clears away the fluff, and we could then really focus on those competencies and skills that were most necessary or most needed. But the other thing that really helped us was we conducted interviews. Those interviews gave us the qualitative data that then informed even more so in some places in our design process. So we interviewed, I think, basically high level VPs, directors, managers, the people who did the actual hiring or who understood the business case for such learning and development for these new frontline managers. We also did some interviews with current frontline managers who were new in roles so that they could tell us, in their first 6 months or first year, now that I've been in this role, now I understand these are the skills that are most necessary. And sometimes that's very different than what's on the job description. So that was really helpful. We also interviewed people who worked with those frontline managers. So those colleagues, those frontline managers supervised, right? Those team members to say, what are you looking for from a frontline manager? And then we took all of that and used that to compare what we found in the research from Lightcast and the job descriptions. That all informed what we came up with in terms of the skills framework. So I would advise designers, researchers, course designers, program designers who are looking to do something similar to this to not forget about the qualitative data because it's very important. And it adds a little bit of it adds a very important component to any good learning design, which is empathy, to understand what the learner or the participant or whoever is receiving the learning really needs and what he or she will encounter along the way. And again, how we can solution around that through what we include in the courses and the programs of study.
I have to admit, that sounds like hard work. Can you tell me a little bit about why that's worth it?
It's worth it because it's so easy to focus on what the so-called data shows. And again, I'm referring to the quantitative data. We can look at the percentages of the number of people who go into frontline management roles and who need additional training. We could look at the number of in-house learning and development programs that large organizations have and say, okay, how does what we're doing fit or compare or improve what's already there? We could do that. And that's going to get us some information that's definitely useful. We could look at the number of people or do surveys and look at the number of people who say that they want this type of training versus those who actually enrolled when it's provided. That's fine. But that extra step, those interviews, those, if you can, focus groups, that gives you that intangible. That gives you not only what needs to be included, but how it should be included. It gives you a sense of what the learner expects from the training and what the learner prefers. And that is where it influences the design. So the content can come from the quantitative data, but the qualitative data provides that extra content that helps us design more effectively. We learned, for example, that people don't have a lot of time. So to do a traditional course, which, there's nothing wrong with a traditional course, may not be the best solution for someone who's struggling with time management, who may be either just have moved into a frontline management role, so they're learning the processes and policies for their organization in that new role. They're supervising team members maybe for the first time. They may not have been a shift supervisor, so this may be their first supervisory role. They're dealing with all of the back end stuff of a hotel or fast food restaurant, whatever it is. There's a lot going on. And they also have a personal life, right? They don't just work. So there's a lot of time management issues. So we had to think about, well, how can we make what we're offering effective, but also appealing to someone who's struggling with time management? Again, that comes down to giving them what they absolutely need, but also presenting it in a way that they're going to be able to digest it. So we did a lot of chunking, which is a term we use in learning design. We did a lot of data visualization. We relied on videos so that we could affect their understanding of the content, but maybe not sitting in front of a computer for 2 or 3 hours, which many of them just don't have. They can listen to a recording, they can listen to a podcast, on the drive home or working out and so forth. So we just try to think about the learner in that sense. And that's why it's worth doing that extra research on the analysis side.
Lita, this has been incredibly informative. As you think about next steps, what do you see on the horizon?
That's a great question. I am really, really looking forward to what we do with AI in terms of learning design and providing solutions to these huge problems that we're seeing from workforce development to just in higher ed in general. One of the ways that I think that we can leverage AI is in the analysis stage of designing. I think that that's going to get us quicker to the design stage. We spend a lot of time on the analysis stage. And I think that AI can help us move through that stage quicker so that we can then get into the solutioning. I also think that using more creative solutions for design is on the horizon. We have so much more to work with course design tools and software. There's so many platforms. And not only are they platforms that are easy to use, but they're upping the ante in terms of quality. So I'm looking forward to more, just better, effective learning design tools that we can use. And then finally, I think for me, it's partnerships. This project more than anything else really helped me understand the beauty of partnering outside of the walls of higher ed. It's wonderful what we do at the university when we partner with other departments and units. It's great. We have our own little ecosystem. But this project with Academy involved reaching out to businesses, other organizations outside of the walls of WGU to really understand what they needed and how they affected what we did. So that kind of partnership, I think, only advances what we do and makes what we do even more robust. So I think more partnering. We talk about that in general in higher ed, like, oh, higher ed has to work with business leaders to design and prepare. But really, when you get down to like small projects, that type of partnering is essential, I think, for both sides.
Well, Lita, this has been incredibly informative. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for joining us on the Inside the Learning Experience with WGU Labs.